College kids from multiple Chicago universities demand all ties be cut with police. Maybe they can use all that saved money to pay for widely expanded coroner services in the city of Chicago. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start in the windy city of Chicago, the city of wind, how appropriate, where students from 9 area universities are demanding their campuses cut ties with Chicago police, calling them a white supremacist cult. You know, when you stop and think about what a cult is, Katie, it seems to me that these progressive college kids are way closer to being a cult than almost anything else we have in America today. Think about what a cult is. They're religious in their hatred of their country. They follow blindly leaders who have horrible track records and ignorant pedigrees. They are violent on demand. When one of the bosses snap their fingers, they're violent. They're shockingly conformist. They have no individual critical thinking skills. They behave like mobs, not like individuals. I would be careful, students of Chicago, from calling the cops a cult. Look at the beam in thine own eye.
Well, the students from these various universities include Northwestern University, the University of Chicago, DePaul University, Roosevelt University, Loyola University of Chicago, the University of Illinois at Chicago, Columbia College, and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, which isn't even in Chicago or anywhere near it, but maybe they have an outlet campus there. So they've formed what they call this coalition of Solidarity Street. Solidarity Street sounds delightful. And they are, like you said, trying to get rid of the policing on campus. Now, what is it that these college kids know how to do? They know how to take to social media. So they went to social media and they posted about how the local police force is, a white supremacist cult. And they argued in their posts that cops only exist to defend wealthy Americans. As they say, cops are not workers. A worker is someone that sells their labor to make ends meet. Cops do not do this. They defend the interests and property of the wealthy. Cops do not need a pay raise. They need to be defunded. They are the armed wing of the American capitalist state. Now, as someone who has been grading placement tests for our school, FreedomProject Academy, I've been grading a lot of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade placement tests. And this is the quality of writing that I am getting from 6th, 7th, and 8th graders with their cops are not workers. A worker is someone that sells.
Forget the grammar. Look at the message they're saying. That cops aren't workers. Workers sell their own labor for what it takes to survive. And yet, they say they don't need raises. Well, if cops don't need raises, the implication that is they're getting paid something. So they are getting paid for their labor, right? I mean, how do you square that circle? The lack of critical thinking of these people is shocking. And this is the same Chicago, let's not forget, that has had dozens and dozens and dozens of shootings every weekend in the last 6 months? Over the 4th of July holiday weekend, over 100 people were shot in Chicago, the very place where these idiots are telling the schools, telling the students, we must not have any police presence whatsoever. Just the other day, we had a situation where the Magnificent Mile in Chicago was raided. You literally had anarchic protesters of college age busting into all the stores in what would be the richest, safest part of the city. You really think that by engaging in this kind of behavior and getting rid of the police, you're going to fix this?
They must, because that's what they're doing. That's what college kids do. They don't have anything else to do. So they're going to just say, we should get rid of the police because that's what, national media has told them. That's what they're supposed to be fighting for, and that's what they do. So in a post, the group argued that cops, as you said, only exist to defend wealthy Americans. Cops are not workers, again. Worker is someone that sells their labor to make ends meet. And then in the next sentence, they say, cops do not do that. Yes, they do. If you're saying cops don't need a raise, you are conceding that cops are making money, right? The cops do not do this, the Post reads. They defend the interest of the property and property of the wealthy. Well, you can get paid to do that. But the one that gets me is when these kids call this, the police officers, the armed wing of the American capitalist state. When you scratch a social justice protester on campus, you immediately sniff the wicked smell of communists, don't you? It never fails. There's a smell?
Scratch and sniff. You have been in college classrooms. You've sat next to these kids, the great unwashed. They show up in their sweatpants and their t-shirts, and they haven't bathed in a week. You know what the smell.
Well, that's because grown adults shouldn't be wearing sweatpants. I agree.
Well,
I fully agree. They should not be wearing sweatpants. They should be wearing actual pants and showering and all of that. But.
So I want to ask you a question. As somebody who's a little bit closer to the age group of some of these protesters, somebody who was recently in the college classroom, an education major, so you went through the hideously bad and politicized education program. What's the end game here for children of your generation?
Well, they're not even of my generation anymore.
Now
They're actually the next generation. I don't think they know what the true end game is. They are just, cogs in the machine of towards the communist end. But I think the ones who are ruling this and the ones who are telling them, it's more of your generation. What's the professor's aim? What it's always
Well, I
been.
can tell you that.
Yeah,
you just hit it on the head. They're useful idiots. They're using these kids. They're too old and feeble and cowardly, quite frankly, the professors, to venture off campus and do this themselves.
It's not the 60s anymore.
Right. They're not going to. They've got nice retirement packages and big Tia-Cref sinecures waiting for them when they retire. They've got tenure. They can't be fired. I know what the professors are doing. They're too lazy, weak, and cowardly to go do this themselves. But empower a group of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, useful idiots, Vladimir Lenin called them, tools of the overthrow of the country. That's what we're doing. And in Chicago, of all places, where we've seen what's happened with far too few police. More people die, not fewer.
Now, there's one kind of professor that Dr. Duke loves more than any other kind, and it's always the African American literature professor. And that's who we're talking about now, the upcoming future African American literature professor, Jesse Goldberg of Auburn University. He hasn't even taken
Can I just point out to you, like all African American professors almost across the country, professors of African American lit, he's white and not black. Can we just say that?
You can say that.
Right. Cultural appropriation.
Yes. Well, Jesse Goldberg is supposed to be the incoming professor at Auburn University to teach African American and American literature. Well, of course, to make an impact, to get his name out there, to be known, whatever it was that he decided, he went to Twitter and he wrote, F every single cop. Every single one. The only ethical choice for any cop to make at this point is to refuse to do their job and quit. The police do not protect people. They protect capital. They are instruments of violence on behalf of capital. And of course, since that tweet came out, it's been deleted and all of that, and he's made his account private. However, the simple fact that he put this tweet out at all speaks volumes.
Well, what does he think he's getting paid with? What do you think a university, and is this Auburn University?
He's incoming
in Alabama,
Auburn,
right?
yeah.
So he's not yet started. And this is a bold move, Cotton. You just got hired. You haven't taught your first class yet, and you've put your university in a position where they have to defend you, right? They have to defend your speech. They're on your side on this, but you should have figured out, get tenure before you start doing this stuff. But with all due respect, what do you think a university is? A university like Auburn University or Alabama or any of the major state universities is a huge source of capital. Human capital, financial capital. Hey, Auburn's got an endowment. It's got an endowment, Mr. Goldberg, as does Alabama and all the other universities, which means there are hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, depending upon the size of the school, millions of dollars sitting there in a bank account that can't be taxed while your kids' tuition keeps going up more and more and more. They are places of American capitalism. I don't know why. Shouldn't you be the one who quits? I mean, if you're a police officer and you're defending the system, okay, fine. Call them agents of capitalism if you want. Capitalism is about freedom. Capitalism is about free markets. If cops protect that, good! That is part of their mission. But how do you excuse yourself, Mr. Goldberg? I'm going to start calling him Rube Goldberg because his attitudes are pretty backward. Rube Goldberg. How do you defend where you're going to work? You're going to be taking $60,000, $70,000 of salary, plus your summers off, plus a huge retirement bonus. You're taking that from institutions whose only job is to pretend to be anti-capitalist while funding everything on taxpayer money, paying your salary, Rube. If anybody needs to quit here, it's you. Cops aren't out there lecturing the world like communists are. They're doing what they're paid to do. You, on the other hand, are pretending to be not just a communist, you're pretending to be black. right? Teaching black literature. What gives you, in your pasty little Jewish background, what gives you the right to lecture students about the African American experience in this country? You're the one taking money on false premises. If anyone needs to step down, it's you. And if Auburn really were the War Eagles, they would have fired you before you moved your first copy of Marx into your dingy little office on campus.
Well, if you would have looked at any of Goldberg's previous posts, you would have known that he's going to refuse Auburn's battle cry because it contains the word war.
The war hawk, yeah.
And then after he was criticized about this, again, he's not even on campus yet. He upped the ante, writing, "Wait until MFers find out I'm queer and teaching G-darn heels too." He didn't say G-darn.
So he's queer, he teaches in heels, he's a Marxist.
Too.
And
Yep.
look, you can be whatever you want. If you want to be a...
He's also a martial artist, according to his Twitter account bio, so you might want to know that.
Boy, I mean, a 6-inch stiletto heel to your eyeball. Can you imagine a Jason Statham kick with a nice pair of Louis Vuittons? I mean, that would do some serious damage to your retina.
Unlike you, I don't have a crush on Jason Statham.
Rube?
So I have never thought about that.
Hey, Rube Goldberg, the irony is that you're a lot of things. You're all of these wonderfully diverse things. I'm sure you're going to get a diversity award for being on campus. Most diversely a named professor on campus. But again, you're not black, and you're not really a communist because you're getting paid from a capitalistic institution. So in the two ways that really matter, Mr. Rube Goldberg, you're a fraud.
Well, and now he's also not going to be a lecturer at Auburn University, as his Twitter account bio had stated. Since the story originally came out, basically, the university has said, okay, we're going to defend him because of his constitutional rights to on his private platform, which we know certain people can write on social media certain things and be fine with it, which he's one. But his Twitter bio has changed now to saying visiting research fellow at Auburn University. And the university has said it agreed to Dr. Goldberg's request, apparently his request, that his role transition, and maybe him, to a research-focused assignment, because he was supposed to teach 4 classes in the fall, and now he's going to do research.
So now he's not going to teach, right? So again, typical university, rather than give him what he wants, separation from a capitalist institution, they find another job for him. And we would be remiss if you wouldn't read his last text from his hiding place.
I'm avoiding Googling my name or anything about Auburn, so if someone could do me a huge favor, let me know if there's any news coverage of the university itself responding to my social media posts, please. Is there any indication anywhere that I might be fired? Nobody's told me.
Attack, 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 and then when somebody pushes back, grovel, grovel, grovel. Way to go, Rube.
From the professors down to the students, we know that the communism indoctrination station that is the university, it's happening. And we have an example from Arizona State University where there is a student senator who simply doesn't like America. But it's not so much she doesn't like America, she absolutely, positively hates America. And she tweeted an image on, of course, July 4th, America's birthday, of a burning flag. And it said, "Death to America." So she sounds like... warm, fuzzy type gal. You just want to hang out with her. Her name is Alexia Ice Ace. Could be pronounced ISIS. I'm not sure. ISAIS. So
she could be AOC's daughter.
Potentially.
She's AOC without knowing how to make a rum and coke.
It's potential. Anyway, I'll call her Alexia. She is a staunch, open communist, and she's not afraid to say anything offensive. So 2 days prior to that, July 2nd, she claimed on the Twitter that the Chinese Communist Party has done more good in the world than the U.S. ever has and ever will. And she, of course, replied to her own tweet saying, also, death to America.
Death to America is like amen in a Baptist church, right? We're going to kill some capitalists. Death to America, right? We're going to take back the country by violence. Death to America, right? And the thing that gets me about this, why is it not hate speech? Why is it when you have communists like this, open communists, right? Usually the university is wagging its finger, right? Quit calling people communists, you conservatives, right? Mm-hmm. You're over the top. Now you have a situation, in the last 2 stories, by the way, right, where you have open communists screaming this. Tell me why it's not offensive to say what she said. Look at what she said. Throw that clip back up there again. So she's literally calling for the death of the entire country. She's calling for the death of our laws, our republic, our constitution, and theoretically, anybody who stands in her way.
Stop it. Those are all words that she doesn't understand.
But so
republic,
what?
anything.
So what?
Death to America, white supremacy. That's what she knows.
when hate is hate, isn't it?
This is a
clear-cut. This is a clear-cut situation where you see this for what it is. All of this Black Lives Matter stuff, all of this pseudo-radical communism, all it is an attempt to hate and have an out for it, right? The people who there are not white supremacist hordes who are burning and looting and lynching. It's not happening. You are not having white supremacist hordes all across this country trying to destroy every aspect of our history and culture. You don't have people being rounded up and have bricks thrown at them and being stopped on the street stopped on the street in your cars by adjutants with guns and masks. That's not happening in the radical right wing. It's happening from the left. And so where are the bias response teams? Where is the university's investigation of this young woman can you imagine if I said death to Iran? Can you imagine if I said death to Nairobi? Can you imagine if you picked any other country and said this on a college campus? If you made the same statements about America as boldly as she's making them about the Communist Republic of China, then what? You would be investigated. The American university system would say by attacking China that way, you are attacking Chinese people, and therefore you are engaging in racism. Notice how the one group of people who you can never be racist against is Americans. Americans, nothing you can say about them, no way you can caricature, no threat you can level against them that will rise to anything like an investigation on a college campus.
Well, she defended herself when campus reform asked her. She says, it's important for me to be unapologetic about my political views as a Mexican-American, and she has an asterisk in there, American woman, whose voice is underrepresented, especially within the world of neoliberal academia. And I do wish for the demise of the United States of America as it stands today as a settler colonial empire which has genocided an entire population of indigenous people, enslaved black people, and continues in its imperialistic reign of terror all over the globe.
Yeah, and so by calling yourself a minority voice, you're justified in defending your hateful views.
She gets to use her minority voice in this free country to hate the country that gave her that voice.
And see, you're such a bad country, America. You're so rotten that you let me hate without consequence because I'm a minority. If you were a minority who hated her country and America was what you said you were, you wouldn't be here. You would not be allowed to get away with it. Maybe, and another thing, you could not be an American in the Mexican school system. You could not be an American who ran away from his country and enrolled and illegally immigrated to Mexico and is in a Mexico college who is saying those things about Mexico. The Mexicans would never allow it. So maybe you got your priorities and your byline exactly the wrong way. Maybe there's a whole bunch of other flags you ought to be burning.
It's time for some real education. When William Billy Shakespeare died in 1616, he was buried in the Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon, the town of his birth. Interred under a slab in front of the altar, the gravestone does not name who was buried beneath. Instead, the world's greatest playwright and poet left us one more piece of verse.
Take a look at Holy Trinity. This is a beautiful country church in Stratford-upon-Avon in the UK. This is where Shakespeare was born, of course. Even people who don't know much about Shakespeare might be able to identify Stratford upon the beautiful Avon River. What a lovely little country church it is, light, airy. Look at that beautiful stained glass work. And if we go a little closer, you'll see the altar, and there's the tombstone of William Shakespeare. And it's what's remarkable for somebody as famous as he was, who would go on to this day radically impact the world and the way we see things, human nature. It's a pretty modest gravestone. I mean, again, he's not buried in the wasn't buried out in the plot outside the church, like Ophelia in his own play Hamlet, where those bones were eventually dug up so that a new body could be put there. Right alongside this church is a charnel house, a bone house. It's a room where all the bones that had been pulled out of old graves were stuck so that new corpses could be buried. Shakespeare had a much more noble fate. You can see his slab there and right in front of the altar. But rather than have his name on it, the poet wrote a good little piece of verse. And it begins, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust and close it here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he who moves my bones. You gotta love that, right? It's a King Tut style curse on the great poet's grave. 4 years ago, they did a radiography, a radar intensive test that projected radar into the crypt underneath the stone without moving the stone, and they found that there was nothing there, that there was no skull of Shakespeare. In fact, we have a hint. In the 19th century, there's an old publication that suggested that a couple of burglars snuck into the church somewhere time in the 1870s and broke one end of the grave and took out the skull and used it for a talisman, right? This back in the 19th and 18th centuries. To possess the skull of a great person, of a great man, was something that was highly sought after, kind of like relics in the Roman Catholic Church. And if you go back to the image of the stone, you will see that it does look like it has been broken. At that front part where the flowers are, went in that way, that's where the head would have been, removed the head, the skull. And when you had this radar test done 4 years ago, there was nothing in the grave, which is very interesting. And so when we close this idea here, that you think about a play like Hamlet, it's all about graveyards and bones, and how much time Shakespeare must have imagined as a little boy sitting in that church. Right there's no door, by the way, on the charnel house. I mean, you could be sitting in the church and glance over there, and then there are these bones from hundreds and hundreds of years going back, people who have been dead for hundreds of years. Imagine what the imagination of a little boy, especially an imaginative little boy like William Shakespeare, was going through his head while he was hearing the Christian litany, while staring at all those bones. And you think about the graveyard scene of Hamlet, where the skull of Yorick, the king's jester, is dug up, and you get all these wonderful reflections on death and mortality, and it's just an interesting full circle that Shakespeare finds himself buried right across from that charnel house under the altar itself in Stratford-upon-Avon.
All right, as always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler, and if you have a question, visit freedomproject.com/askduke and send them our way. Now, we're going to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. Spray paint was invented in Chicago in 1949, so if you've been to Chicago, you can see it all over the city, everywhere, and it marks the gang areas and, all the violence that happens.
Is that spray paint or is that blood? Spattered blood from hundreds and thousands of African Americans who have been murdered by other African Americans and for whom Black Lives Matter has nothing to say. And that's our show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.